session on customer service for the 2021 CACRAO Newcomers Conference. Whether you're new to the profession or you're new to your current institution, I'm thrilled that you've decided to attend, and I hope that this will help you either learn more or confirm some of what you know about what an excellent customer service mindset is and how to provide that in an academic setting. So as we get started, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself and why I'm talking to you about customer service. So my name is Jessica Horn. I currently serve as the Associate Director of Transfer Admissions at UNC Wilmington at our main campus in Wilmington, North Carolina. I started my career in the Office of Admissions in 2014 as a Transfer Admissions Coordinator, and since then have been an Assistant Director and then a Senior Assistant Director and now Associate Director. Prior to UNCW, I worked for the University of Maryland Global Campus as a field representative, and I also worked as a counselor aide for the Army Education Center in Illesheim, Germany. So in total, I have about 10 years of experience in higher education, working with a variety of different student types. And the majority of that experience has been in kind of that frontline service area of admissions. I'm also a member of the 2021 CACRAO Executive Committee. I serve as the treasurer. This is my third tenure on the executive committee. I've also been a member at large and a secretary. And I became involved with CACRAO in 2018 just because I love the industry of higher education and the work that we do. And CACRAO is an excellent way to get involved and build your network and meet your tribe. So if that's something you're interested in, I'm also happy to talk with you more about CACRAO as well. All right, so I know at this point, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, why are we talking about customer service when we work in higher education? Most of the time, the words customer service kind of invoke a private sector connotation. You might think of, standing in line at Target or in the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A or emailing a customer service department of your favorite online store. But customer service also definitely has its place within our industry and within higher education. That hasn't always been the case. That is kind of a relatively new idea and thought, but the last 10 years especially has seen an increase in the importance of customer satisfaction within our higher education sector. So within higher education, industry experts define customer service as, meeting the expectations of those who provide the inflow of funds or value to an organization. For most colleges and universities, a large percentage, especially if you're a public institution, a large percentage of your operating budget comes from tuition dollars. So what that means within higher education is that customers also equal students. And as admissions and registrar professionals, it's our responsibility to really effectively meet the expectations of those students and make sure that we are providing them with that monetary and cultural value of our organization or our institution. So what does that mean in an academic environment? So in an academic environment, service means prioritizing the student experience and ensuring student satisfaction. That in turn also helps the university retain the student and encourage them to persist through graduation. We all have seen and know that there's a growing price tag associated with higher education. So we really need to be mindful to demonstrate the value that we as a collective or college or university are providing to students and their families. For example, I was at a conference once and the keynote speaker was Wes Moore. If you haven't heard of him, he has a couple of books. He's really inspirational, so check him out. But he said something that always stuck with me, which was that, in higher education, we're helping students access an experience that will change their lives. So from a customer or student service perspective, we want to make sure that accessing that experience is as seamless and as smooth as possible for students. Another famous quote you might see if you're, researching customer service or looking at customer service is from Sam Walton, who was the original founder of Walmart. And he once said, if you don't take care of your customer, someone else will. And that was kind of his philosophy when he started his company. And unfortunately, this quote is also true of higher education consumers. But in higher education, the way this translates is that students might leave or they might transfer, which can then in turn affect the retention at your institution. And that's kind of illustrated in this article from Academic Impressions on Customer Service. This is from a 2012 study on reasons why students leave college. And the study by Neil Raceman found that 23% of surveyed students left the college they were attending because they had the perception that they were provided with poor service. So that statistic really speaks to the difference that service can make in a student's college experience. So now that you kind of know why quality service is so important in an academic environment, we can talk about some key components for providing premier customer service to students. And since this is part of the Newcomers conference, we're going to use CACRAO to illustrate some top components for ensuring student satisfaction. So some of those components we'll talk about include, how you communicate, anticipating students' needs, creating solutions, responding, the attitude that you have, and then being able to offer those solutions. So we'll start with communication. And this, as you all I'm sure know, is a vital piece of ensuring student satisfaction and providing excellent service. When you're communicating with students, it's important to think about meeting them where they are. And that might be figuratively by trying to understand, where the students are coming from, what issues or challenges they might be facing, and what about their personal circumstances is making it difficult for them to overcome the issue that they're having. In our current pandemic and virtual environment, that also might mean adjusting to, how you literally meet with students. So most of us have not been able to meet with students in person for a long time. And so we've sort of evolved in our meeting with students virtually now. So maintaining that virtual appointment availability is key, and also making yourself available in other ways. If students need to chat over the phone or through email, and just kind of always maintaining that open line of communication with them. When you're communicating with students, it's also important not to use jargon or abbreviations. And that's something that can be hard to do because in higher education, we love our abbreviations, and we are sort of used to talking in that way about the admissions process and about our registrar processes. But it's important to break it down into terminology that students can understand. Some of you might have heard of plain language, and that's really just stating what it is and trying to frame it in a way that students can understand and break down concepts so that they can follow along easily. It's also important, in addition to speaking and thinking about the way that you're speaking, to practice active listening. So sometimes, you'll have a student or a family and they just want to talk to somebody. They just need to express kind of what's going on in their situation. So it's important to have that patience and that mindset to really listen and really try to understand what it is that they're asking. Navigating college processes can be intimidating, especially for first generation students. So trying to empathize with them and putting yourself kind of in their shoes, how would you want to be treated if you were in that similar situation? Kind of all good stuff to remember and think about. And our next key component is really anticipation, and that, will take practice if you're kind of new to the profession, but as you progress in your career in higher education, you'll really become able to anticipate student needs before they know what to ask. So for example, if you're working with a student and they've been admitted, they might email you one question about their enrollment deposit, but when you respond, you might include other information for their next steps. Like maybe you go ahead and anticipate that they're going to have questions about what they need to do next and give them information about orientation or housing or et cetera. And that will hopefully help to ensure kind of a seamless process for them as they continue working towards their goal, which ultimately for you is enrolling at your institution. And if you're having trouble, especially as you're sort of new to your career, if you're having trouble anticipating or understanding what a student needs, ask questions for clarification or conduct your own research. Sometimes, students don't know how to ask the right question or even what they're looking for, especially if you're working with a student who is from a first generation a background, a family that doesn't really know how to navigate the college process. So for example, if they email you and they want to know who their academic advisor is, you might look them up and see they haven't even, kind of taken the next steps in their admissions process. So kind of having that conversation with them about, what are their goals? Are they planning to enroll? What information are they trying to obtain so that you can make sure you're getting them connected with the right people and the right information. When you're working with students, like we already talked about, it's important to create that open line of communication, but it's also important to create kind of a calm atmosphere for them, especially if you're in a difficult situation with a student or a family. The worst thing you can do is escalate by mirroring their emotion. So it's important to lend that listening ear and empathize with their situation. That can be difficult to do, especially if you're kind of the first person that they talk to. It's hard not to take it personal, but it's really important to kind of be objective and separate yourself from that and understand, they're not necessarily mad at you, they're upset about the situation. So just trying to help them work through their problem. And eventually that can create a trust between you and the student and their family. So once you kind of have that trust established in that relationship, then you can kind of continue to work with them and they'll return to you again and again if they have other issues. And another way that you can really encourage and develop trust with your students is by responding to their inquiries in a timely manner. So do your best to return emails and voicemails within a 24 to 48 hour window, even if it's just to say, I don't know that answer right now, but I will find out and get back to you. And in that same vein, it's important not to respond with an answer if you're not sure what the correct answer is. So it's okay to tell a student that you don't know, but you'll find the answer for them. And that can also establish trust if you're transparent and don't want to mislead them. And then it's also best practice to personalize your responses for each student that you work with. So if you're emailing them, addressing them by name and then signing your own name at the bottom, if they've shared, their name with you. If not, just kind of having that greeting and then the signature line and the sign-off line, that will help students feel special and not just like they're another number and you're just kind of doing an automated response. And then of course, being thorough and providing as much information as you can, to help them with their questions. And then this one, is probably pretty common sense when we're talking about customer service, but always just maintaining a positive attitude. We all get overwhelmed and burnt out, especially right now in our current environment. It's very easy to do. So it's important to remember that even if you've heard the same question 12 times, it might be it is the first time that this student is asking that particular question. And part of demonstrating that positive attitude also is practicing going above and beyond. So you might think of that as the me plus one. So if they come to you with a difficult situation or concern, trying to help them solve their problem, but then also doing one extra step, following up with them to make sure that they got the information that they needed or that they don't have any other questions is also a good practice. And then finally, there is a common attitude in customer service that the customer is always right. I'm sure you've heard that, but in higher education, that's not necessarily the case. With our processes, sometimes, our customers or students are not going to be right, but it's our responsibility to make sure that our attitude is to make the situation right. So even if it's not something that we can achieve for them, we're doing the best we can to make sure that they understand and can accept the situation. And then finally, our last kind of key component here is offering solutions. So if a student does come to you, with a problem or concern, just analyzing that problem so you can understand the root of the student's challenge, and trying to explain the situation as best you can in a way that the student will understand. Again, kind of breaking it down, using plain language and translating some of those higher education concepts, and then offering a solution to help them, overcome their problems. So a lot of times, as an example, in admissions, we see most often a student that has been denied admission, and those are difficult conversations to have. There's really no easy way to have that conversation with a student that needs to reassess their plans, but they can be navigated by active listening, being transparent, explaining the reason behind the decision, as best you can. That's going to be easier for some offices or some students than others, and then offering possible solutions to become a more competitive applicant or find another pathway to join our community. And so while this, won't completely remove the student's disappointment, it will ensure that they walk away from the experience with a positive impression of your institution. And that is the end of our key components. So I just pasted the article here that I referenced earlier in the slide. If you want to read it or learn more about customer service in higher education, feel free to follow up with that resource. And then I do see a couple of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to address those now. And the first question is how to anticipate without assuming a student situation, which I think is a great question because you never want to, assume that something about a student if you don't. So I think in terms of anticipation, you just necessarily want to think in terms of what the process looks like, and just because sometimes students don't necessarily understand. So for the example that I gave was, if a student asks about the enrollment deposit, in your response, you can answer their question, but then say, here's some other resources that might help you as you navigate your next steps. And just kind of providing general information so that, it's not specific to their situation, but it might help anticipate some of the needs or questions that they're going to have in the future. And along with that, I think it's always a good idea to sign off on your emails with just kind of that, if you have further questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help, that kind of thing, so that they know that that line of communication continues to remain open. So that was a great question. Thank you for that one. And I'll give just a few seconds. This is the end of my presentation that I have for you all today. So I'll give a few minutes if anybody wants to enter in any other questions in the Q&A or the chat box. Also, if you have questions later, either about customer service or about CACRAO, you're welcome to reach out to me. My email address and my direct line are on the screen. So I'm happy to talk with you about any of those things. All right, I don't see any more questions coming in through the Q&A or the chat. So at this time, I'll just thank you again for attending this session and engaging with the CACRAO Newcomers Conference this year, even though it looks, a little different. I hope you found this presentation informative and gained some valuable knowledge about setting that customer service excellence mindset at your institution. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.